Hi friends, welcome to La Rosa Reads. I'm Denise La Rosa, and today I'm going to share with you the books that I read in the beautiful month of May. Let's talk books. Oh, May. May was an incredibly busy month for me. I have a daughter who is graduating, if that's the way you think of it, graduating from fourth grade, going to middle school, which begins in fifth grade at her school. And needless to say, the pomp and circumstance that surrounds this milestone at her school is the most. So she had so many field trips. She was one of the lead characters in the school musical. We had so many events to attend as parents and so many things to prepare for, not to mention the dance recital that both of my girls are participating in. It was a hectic month, yet it was a month that I was able to read 8 books. So that was amusing and refreshing. I really needed the self-care of just immersing myself, losing myself in a book. It was so busy, and I am somebody who tends to be or present as being outgoing and very extroverted, but I'm an ambivert. I can be extroverted, but at some point I need to be away from people and alone with myself. So I have that combination of being extroverted and introverted, which is described as an ambivert. And there was a lot of extroverted things happening. My youngest daughter's birthday party and all the things I just mentioned. And I just was relishing in these 8 reads, so I'm excited to share them with you. The first book that I read in the month of May was When Stars Are Scattered. This book I get all the feels when I think of this beautiful graphic novel that also serves as a biography, somewhat memoir. It is truly a special and engaging read. It's just everything and then some. I remember sharing this book with you guys during my New York City book haul video, and I was looking forward to it. I predicted that it would be an incredible read, and indeed it was. So this book is about 2 Somalian brothers, Omar and Hassan, who become refugees. They are traumatized by the memories of having this somewhat normal life, losing their father being killed, and then losing their mother, not being able to connect with their mother when things got chaotic. They landed at a refugee camp in Kenya and had a village, if you will, of people that surrounded them with love and support. And this book is co-written by Omar and Victoria Jameson. And let me just tell you guys, it was full of emotions. I was smiling, I was laughing, I was crying. I was just finding myself praying for the best for these 2 brothers. And indeed, the ending is so, so sweet. And you also have here at the end a wonderful epilogue, if you will, and some pictures, some photographs of the brothers in real life. You get to find out in the afterword what happened to these brothers. And I just highly recommend this book to everyone. Whether you're typically a graphic novel reader or a middle grades reader, it doesn't matter. I feel like this book just goes beyond genres. It's one of those heartfelt stories that everyone's going to enjoy, and you definitely need to check it out. So this was the month of memoirs for me, and that was a genre that I typically would go to, and I hadn't really read a whole lot of memoirs in recent times. And so to have like a few of them in my monthly reading was really interesting. A little bit heavy because the memoirs that I read were very emotional, very sharing a lot of trauma and overcoming that trauma. So I found myself on some wild rides, including Viola Davis's Finding Me. Viola Davis is an actress whom I greatly admire. I'm inspired by her, and the way that she takes the performing art of acting, it's so much more than entertainment. She really has the ability to take you into these characters' lives and make them so true, so real, so moving, so gripping that you actually forget that they are just that, they're characters. I love her. She is someone, as a Black woman, that I admire and adore. She's so strong and commanding. She has such a commanding presence. And so I was wanting to learn more about this woman. What makes her such an incredible actress, an incredible performing artist? Oftentimes, the most talented among us are the ones who have lived the most trauma, the most pain, and finding out about her in this deeply personal way was something that I treasured. I found myself relishing in this book word for word. It was an Oprah's Book Club selection. I watched the Netflix special with Oprah and Viola Davis. And I must say, this book that talks about some of the most traumatic, troubling times of her life that just blew me away. How can someone overcome this and just exist in the world, much less become famous and incredibly adored and be full of, this sense of overcoming? And I'm rambling because I'm in awe of her. Because when we talk about someone growing up not poor, but Viola Davis was as Oprah says. And then to find acting and have acting be that healing balm for her, that way out for her. And then for her to have so many struggles with colorism and typecasting, being a dark-skinned Black woman and overcoming that. She is someone that I adore because I was a huge fan of How to Get Away with Murder, and to discover how that character actually healed Viola Davis on a personal level was really fascinating to read about. The last chapter and a half, y'all, oh my goodness. I was so deeply moved. I was just sobbing. So Finding Me delivered for me. It is something that I think will always stick with me. This book is going to stick with me. It's going to be one of those that for years to come, I'm going to occasionally be thinking about and just have all the feels. And speaking of all the feels, speaking of memoirs, I actually buddy read with Olive, Unprotected by Billy Porter. This memoir was everything and then some. I found myself just being full of sadness and then full of joy. It was like a roller coaster ride from one extreme emotion to the opposite of that extreme emotion. Just on this journey. And when I tell you there was no ghostwriter, I don't have a problem with, celebrities or any other, authors who are writing their life story. I have no problem with them having ghostwriters. But I have to admit, it is truly refreshing for me as a reader to read a book that you feel like is all that person. Like only that person is speaking to you. They're not hiding behind someone else. No one else is guiding them to say the things that they're saying. And that's what I found to be true with Billy Porter's memoir, Unprotected. As a fellow Pittsburgher, Billy Porter grew up in Pittsburgh, was born and raised there, and became a performer there. I'm actually here in Pittsburgh. I have been a Pittsburgher for over 17 years, so I found it very amusing to read about these different places in the Pittsburgh area that if you're a Pittsburgher, you're going to appreciate this book 10 times more than the average person. It was so incredible to read about Billy Porter's journey as a Black gay man, a young man, a little boy who knew he was different, and also being born and raised and growing up in the Black church, which oftentimes looks down upon homosexuality. Yet he had this talent for singing, and so he was celebrated as a singer, singing for the Lord in church, but at the same time, when he was sitting in those pews, felt himself being condemned and judged by those same people who were showering him love. And so that's kind of setting the tone for how this story continues to unfold. He too, much like Viola Davis, experienced some very troubling times, some trauma that has defined him in some ways. It defined his journey, but didn't define him. That's how I would say it. He didn't allow these moments to mark him in a negative way. He used those moments to inform the kind of person he wanted to become and inform his journey of overcoming and becoming who he knew he could be, who he knew he always was. And so shout out to him. I love Billy Porter. I love Unprotected. It is a fascinating read. Jasmine Guillory, I love you, boo. And once again, you made my heart sing with your wonderful gift of writing romance novels. And By the Book was simply, purely a delight. So we have two characters here that are doing a spin-off of a Disney movie. I don't know, maybe you heard of it, Beauty and the Beast. So this is book 2 in the Meant to Be series, which is a Disney romance novel book series that I'm actually excited about. I didn't read book 1, but I'm definitely going to read book 1 after reading book 2. And I love how this series is spotlighting, featuring the work of various authors. So it's not one author writing the entire series. Jasmine Guillory is responsible for book 2, By the Book. So we have the two main characters, Isabel, also known as Izzy, and Beau. Beau is this celebrity, I don't know, he's like, his parents were celebrities. His mom was a famous actress. His dad a famous movie director. And so he was a celebrity's kid. He was in a lot of trouble. He was known as the bad boy in Hollywood. Isabel, also known as Izzy, is working for a publishing company who is responsible for delivering Beau's memoir that everybody's waiting for. But the only problem is Beau is not doing anything. He's not writing his memoir. He's not responding to his agent whenever his agent is checking in on him to see how far along he is with the book. And long story short, Izzy says, you know, she's a young assistant, and she's like, this is my time to step in and do something to stand out. So she volunteers to swing by Beau's house and try to help him move this process along. And she ends up at his house, much like Belle in Beauty and the Beast, and the romance unfolds very much in parallel with the Beauty and the Beast narrative. It was a delight. I thought to myself going in, is this going to be, there was two things I was wondering. Is this going to be true to Jasmine Guillory's vibe, her writing style, the style of her characters? And also, number 2, is this going to be really far-fetched for like an adult? I mean, it's technically a young adult romance novel. Is this going to be too corny or cheesy? And I have to say, Jasmine Guillory handled this assignment. She knew the assignment and she handled it with grace, with beauty, with talent, with skill. It was delightful. I highly recommend you read this book, especially if you're a little bit nostalgic for fairy tales, yet some realism. It just hit the spot. So once again, Jasmine Guillory, you have my heart. I am so excited about this book. I have not had a book that just makes me smile when I think of it or when I see the cover. It has been a long time since I've had that feeling about a book. But when I tell you Finlay Donovan is killing it, is that book for me right now? Oh my goodness. I predicted this book was going to be a 5-star read for me, and indeed it truly was. Finlay Donovan was a riot. This whole entire mystery novel was hilarious and fun and just, it was a wild ride. I don't know how else to describe it, but Finlay Donovan is a troubled author, kind of like a C or D list author, and she's recently divorced. She has 2 kids who are like toddlers. They're super young, and can I just say, as a mom, I totally went there. My daughters are 21 months apart, and I totally remember that era, that time in my life that Finlay Donovan is living in this book, where they're just everywhere and doing everything, and nothing is like normal, nothing is calm, it's just chaos everywhere. So imagine that. Imagine her jerk of an ex-husband who had an affair with the real estate agent and is about to marry her. And Finlay Donovan writes these murder/romance novels. I don't know. It's like an interesting kind of genre that she's navigating, and she's meeting her agent at a Panera, and the way they're talking, it sounds like they're talking about murdering somebody and like she's a contracted killer. And someone who is at this Panera who was scheduled to meet a contracted killer hears Finlay and thinks this is the contracted killer. And she is not the contracted killer, but she becomes the contracted killer. And from there, it just gets wild. I think my favorite character, like Finlay, love her, but my favorite character was her babysitter, her nanny. I'm not going to give you any spoilers. I want you to read this book for yourself. Like, seriously. I know a lot of booktubers say that, and I say it, but please read this book and connect with me. Let me know what you think, which characters speak to you. I just want to hear from everybody who reads this book or who has read this book. It is amazing, and I will definitely be reading the sequel. So shifting gears, I found myself reading 2 books about refugees this month, and I'm grateful that I didn't read them back to back because the books were both heavy in their own right. Yes, the graphic novel When Stars Are Scattered is a graphic novel in middle grades, but don't make no mistake about it. Don't get me wrong. Like, just because it's middle grades doesn't mean that it wasn't deeply emotional. It truly was. And so was this collection of poetry, Bless the Daughter Raised by a Voice in Her Head by Warsan Shire. It was it shouldn't have been a quick read for me. I probably will reread this collection of poetry. I found myself going through it quickly because it was so emotional, and I just wanted to just get through it because I found myself feeling so many different emotions. I mean, there's just so much. I'm going to read one of the poems. This one, Assimilation. I found myself, I don't typically dog ear books because it's like nails going down a chalkboard for me. But I was reading this while at a coffee shop, and I just found myself being so deeply moved by certain ones. Assimilation. We never unpacked, dreaming in the wrong language, carrying our mother's fears in our feet. If he raises his voice, we will flee. If he looks bored, we will pack our bags, unable to excise the refugee from our hearts, unable to sleep through the night. The refugee's heart has 6 chambers. In the first is your mother's unpacked suitcase. In the second, your father cries into his hands. The third room is an immigration office. Your severed legs in the fourth. In the fifth, a uterus, yours. The sixth opens with the right papers. I can't get the refugee out of my body. I bolt my body whenever I get the chance. How many pills does it take to fall asleep? How many to meet the dead? The refugee's heart often grows an outer layer. In assimilation, it cocoons the organ. Those unable to grow the extra skin die within the first 6 months in a host country. This book allowed me to truly see and be able to visualize and imagine the refugee experience in a way that honestly I never have taken the time to do before. And for that, I am so appreciative of this book, of this poet, and I highly recommend that you read this book. All right, speaking of empathy, you guys, I had another book that allowed me to kind of step out of myself and my own lived experience and try to imagine the lived experience of someone that could be described as being very different than me and having a different lived experience than my own. And that book that took me there is Mercy Street, a novel by Jennifer Hague. So we follow a woman by the name of Claudia who works at an abortion clinic. We also follow 2 other characters who are kind of indirectly connected to Claudia. We have Victor Prine, who is a man that is very much anti-abortion, very much pro-life. We have another guy who is a man who sells weed. And I know this is sounding a little wild as I start off telling you about these 3 main characters and kind of what they do and who they are. But when I tell you the way their lives are interconnected just illuminates the fact that we all are interconnected, no matter how differently we believe, no matter how different we are as individuals, as far as lived experiences and aesthetics and demographics, we are all interconnected. And so Claudia, who works at this abortion clinic, was a woman who grew up very poor in a trailer park and never knew her father. And some of these experiences that she had growing up, and the mother that she had, who also took in foster children, she had those lived experiences inform her as far as like telling her, speaking to her about who she didn't want to be. She didn't want to be her mother. Yet as she begins to evolve and live her life as an adult, she kind of circles back to embracing who she is and where she came from. We also have Victor Prine, who I read some of the reviews, and when we're thinking of a stereotype for a pro-lifer, an anti-abortion man, white man, I don't want to say, like, this isn't a stereotype that I'm setting. It's the stereotype that's out there in society. A white man, Republican, that never really had a girlfriend himself, that never really understood the female anatomy. And so there was a little bit of stereotyping there that was a little troubling. His character was very extreme, and not all people who are pro-life are that character. They're not all Victor Prines. But I think what Jennifer Hague does so beautifully is, through Claudia's work at the abortion clinic, we hear about 4 or 5 stories of women who had visited this clinic, not just for abortions. Like, this is also a women's health clinic, so they're going for healthcare. And we also do talk about women who had come to the clinic to have an abortion for different reasons. And it kind of gave me an opportunity, it did give me an opportunity to lean into the humanity of these women who are making these choices. And I mean, at a crazy time where this is a hot topic that is very much in the media. So no matter where your beliefs lie on this topic, this is a book that is enlightening, it is intriguing. It helps us all to see the humanity in the people who make these choices one way or the other. I found myself being empathetic towards Victor Prine, being empathetic towards Claudia, being empathetic towards all of the characters that came through, no matter how small of a role they played in this book. And Jennifer Hague, when I heard her speak at the Pittsburgh Festival of Books, I knew what she meant when she said that she had to have empathy for all of the characters that she writes about, because Victor Prine can come across as a villain, and unless you hear her speak to her writing process, you're going to assume that she's very one-sided on this issue. The reality is she leaned into all of the characters, and while I do think I gathered from her author talk that I gathered where she lands on this topic, she really tried her best to practice empathy and understanding for all of the characters. Read this book. It is amazing in every way. The author's craft, the writing choices, phenomenal. Last but not least, we have the last book I read in the month of May, and it is Amina's Voice. This book by Hina Khan is a book that was a choice read that my oldest daughter, Gianna, could read going into 5th grade. I love her school. It's also the place where I work. And we have required summer reading for our students in grades 3rd through 12th grade. And for the 5th grade summer reading, I think it's so awesome that the students have a choice among 5 books. This was one of the 5 books that Gianna could have chosen to read. And she did not choose this one. But as I was reading the synopsis, I was kind of digging it myself. So I was like, hey, Gianna, I'm going to actually read this book and let you know what I think. I think she picked the right book for her. Amina's Voice, however, was a book that I was very interested in reading myself. So Amina is a Muslim student who is a wonderful, talented, gifted singer. but she is afraid to let her voice be heard. She is very shy and inhibited. She also is a pianist. She has a friend who is Korean, Soo-jin, and they have been friends since elementary school, and now that they're entering middle school, she being Amina, is finding that their relationship is changing. They're kind of going in two different directions. Amina's a little more young at heart, whereas her friend Soo-jin is kind of getting into boys and, becoming a middle schooler faster than Amina is. And then there's also the Islamic Center where Amina spends a lot of her time with her family. So we have a couple of things happening. We have Amina's friendship, and it's kind of in the air. We don't know where that's going. Are they growing apart? Will they ever be close again? We also have a tragic event, a hate crime that happens at the Islamic Center. It is set ablaze, and Amina, who really took this community, this very important part of her community, for granted, is forced to reckon with the fact that the Islamic Center meant more to her than she could have ever realized. And it wasn't until it was burned down that she had an appreciation for it and the people who embodied that community. This book was a solid read for young people. I found myself as an adult appreciating the characters and Amina's journey. I think it's a book that Gianna will end up reading beyond this required summer read. I highly recommend it for all ages. It was enlightening. It was a great reading experience. Okay, here are my 8 reads for the month of May. I hope that I have shared with you some books that maybe you will add to your TBR. And also, if I shared some books today that you've already read, let me know in the comments what you think about these reads. Let me know if you haven't read one of these books or any of these books, but you plan to read them. Let's keep this conversation going. And in the meantime, you can also check out more of my videos, including this one right here. And until next time, happy reading, my friends. Peace.